Hi, and welcome back. So, what if we've got intuition completely backwards? As humans, we spend an enormous amount of time trying to get out of our bodies. We practice astral projection, out of body experiences, transcendence, altered states. The idea that somehow to access something greater, we have to get beyond the physical. But what if the opposite is true? So, I'm just asking you to think with me here. Suspend your disbelief for a moment. What if intuition doesn't come from leaving the body, but from becoming more completely embodied? And I'm not talking about a metaphor here. I mean, literally paying attention to the extraordinary amount of information your organism is processing all the time. Because your body is not just the thing carrying your mind around, your body is part of how you know things. And that changes the way I think about intuition. Example, this morning I was folding towels. That's it. Nothing mystical was happening, I promise. I was standing there folding laundry, listening to an AI conversation through my phone. And suddenly I became aware of the experience of doing it. So I noticed the texture of the towels, the smell, my feet against the floor, my toes pressing into the carpet, the movement of my hands, and the sound of the words coming through the phone and entering through my ears. And I realized, wait a minute, all of that is happening at once. My brain wasn't waiting for me to consciously say, okay, now process the towel, now process the carpet, now process the smell, now process your feet. The organism was already doing it. I was simply becoming more aware of the fact that it was happening. And that got me to think about intuition because we tend to imagine intuition as something almost supernatural, or maybe some of you think of it as being supernatural. It's a feeling that arrives from nowhere, a knowing that appears without evidence, a message, a download, a mysterious signal. But what if the information isn't coming from nowhere? What if it's coming from more of you than your conscious verbal mind can access? We have a very strange cultural habit of equating thinking with knowing. If I can put something into words, I can treat it as legitimate knowledge. If I can't explain it, then we become suspicious of things that we can't explain. And obviously that's useful. I mean, words let us communicate, reasoning lets us test ideas, and logic lets us test or detect contradictions. We absolutely do need those things. But your verbal conscious mind is not the entirety of your information processing system. Think of that again. Your verbal conscious mind is not the entirety of your information processing system, and it's far from it. Your organism is continuously receiving information about your environment, your posture, movement, temperature, pressure, sound, smell, vision, internal sensations, breathing, muscle tension, and countless other things that we never even notice. So much of that information never becomes a sentence. It never comes out of your mouth. You never verbalize it. You may not even realize it. But that doesn't mean it wasn't processed. It means processing and verbal awareness are not the same thing. That's important because if intuition sometimes represents the output of information that has been processed without becoming consciously verbalized, then intuition may feel mysterious for a very ordinary reason. You experience the conclusion without having access to every step that produced it. So think about a situation where you meet someone and immediately you think something's off. Something's off about them, and you may not know why. Their words might be perfectly pleasant, and there's maybe nothing obvious wrong, but something doesn't quite fit. So there are at least two possibilities. One is that you've detected something meaningful that you haven't consciously articulated. You've noticed tiny patterns in tone, timing, facial expression, posture, context, word choice, or even behavior. Your system integrates those things, and the result reaches consciousness as something's off. The other possibility is that you're wrong. And that's enormously important because intuition is not automatically truth. Your organism can detect real information. It can also misinterpret information. It can use old patterns. It can be biased. It can mistake familiarity for safety. It can mistake unfamiliarity for danger. and it can fill in missing information. So I felt it isn't the same as I know it. That's why I think one of the most important skills in developing intuition is to learn to distinguish signal from interpretation. Let's say you walk into a room and immediately feel uncomfortable. The raw observation might be, my body feels different here, and that's useful information. But then the mind can immediately leap to, oh, something bad is going to happen. That's an interpretation. Those are not the same thing. And if you're interested in intuition, that distinction is so very important because the first thing you notice may be genuinely valuable, while the story you attach to it might be completely wrong. So instead of saying, I'm uncomfortable, therefore this person is dangerous, you might need to say, I'm uncomfortable, but what am I noticing? So maybe your shoulders tightened, your breathing changed, your stomach dropped. Maybe you became hyper alert. Maybe the room is simply unfamiliar. Maybe someone reminded you unconsciously of a person from your past. Or maybe there really is something unusual happening. You don't know yet, and that's okay. Intuition doesn't require immediate interpretation. In fact, sometimes interpretation is exactly what interferes with it. This is where embodiment becomes particularly interesting. Your body isn't just receiving information from outside of you, it's also continuously reporting information about itself. Where am I? How am I moving? How much effort am I using? What is changing? What feels different? What's happening internally? That's an enormous information stream, and most of it doesn't reach ordinary conscious attention, which means that becoming more embodied isn't necessarily about adding another mysterious ability. It may be about allowing more of an existing information system to become available to conscious attention. That's a very different proposition. You don't have to leave your body. You may have to become better at inhabiting it. And this is where I think humans have a fascinating contradiction. We are embodied creatures. Almost everything we experience happens through embodiment. And yet, so many traditions and practices treat embodiment as something to transcend. We want to rise above the body, leave the body, escape the body, or get beyond physical limitation. And I'm not saying altered states or extraordinary experiences aren't real experiences. I've had them myself. I'm saying something much simpler. Maybe we sometimes overlook the extraordinary capabilities of the state we're already in. The body is not merely the obstacle between you and some higher state. It is an incredibly sophisticated sensing system. And perhaps some form of what people call expanded awareness isn't about escaping embodiment at all. Perhaps they're about increasing the amount of embodied information you can actually perceive and integrate. Now, that's a hypothesis, not a conclusion, but it's a fascinating one. And this is where I want to make an important distinction. I'm not suggesting every sensation you have is intuitive wisdom. And I'm not suggesting that your body knows the future or that every gut feeling is accurate. But I think intuition becomes much more interesting when you put it in conversation with reasoning. Your body notices something. Your conscious mind asks, what is happening? You investigate, you test, you revise. That becomes more powerful than either extreme because pure rationalism or skepticism can ignore information that hasn't become verbal yet, and they shut the door to it. But pure intuition can mistake subjective feeling for objective truth. But together, that's an interesting system. So here's something you can try. Not a ritual or a visualization or a mystical exercise, but just observation. The next time you have an intuitive response to something, don't immediately ask, what does this mean? Instead, ask, what exactly happened in my body? Did your breathing change, posture change, your shoulders move, attention narrow? Did you lean towards something, pull away? Did your hands change? Did your stomach change? Did you suddenly become more alert? Then ask the second question. What did I conclude from all of that? And keep those two things separate. Experience first, interpretation second. Over time, you may begin to recognize your own patterns. And that matters because intuition is personal. This is what I do when I'm working with the Zener cards. So when I started trying to interpret the cards upside down, trying to get them right, I recorded every single hit and every single miss, and I recorded what was going on in my body during those. And I found patterns. I found things that would definitely make me miss the intuitive hit and other things that would make the intuitive hit more accurate. That is personal to me, though. Your organism has a history. Your nervous system has learned patterns that are specific to you. Your body has accumulated information you may not be able to narrate. So, developing intuition may partly involve learning. What does my system do when it detects something meaningful? Not what somebody on the internet tells you intuition is supposed to feel like. Not whether it arrives as a voice, a flash, a color, a download, a stomach sensation. What does your system actually do? And this brings me back to my towel folding because there was nothing extraordinary about folding them. But for a moment, I wasn't trying to get away from embodiment. I was completely inside it. Texture, smell, pressure, movement, sound, balance, attention, thought, all of it happening together. And I suddenly had the sense that perhaps the thing we call intuition isn't some faculty that sits outside ordinary human cognition. Maybe it is what happens when more of the organism participates in knowing. Maybe the body isn't competing with the mind. Maybe we've been dividing something that was never actually separate. So here's the question I want to leave you with. What if you don't need to become more intuitive? What if you need to become more available to the information you're already receiving? What if the body isn't the thing you have to transcend to access something greater? What if the body is actually one of the places where the greater information is already happening? And maybe intuition isn't information arriving from somewhere else. Maybe it's something arriving from more of you. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.